Welcome back to the Mark Faris Experience. Today, we're going to be speaking with Ken and Geri Rounds. So they're the entrepreneurs behind Rounds Ranch. They turned a small farm into a incredibly popular spot in the local area. And so now they're actually helping young entrepreneurs, in addition to running that business, to get started in business. And they also have some other things they have going on in the entrepreneur field. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome, Ken and Geri, to the show.
Great to be here.
Well, you guys have such an entrepreneur mindset and you guys are successful right across the board. But why don't you go ahead and get started and tell us a little bit about how you guys got started in the business of Rounds Ranch and where did that idea come up in regards to being such a, we'll say, I'd call you guys an anchor in the local community. How did you guys start that idea? And maybe you can explain a little bit about what Rounds Ranch is.
I'd like to maybe rewind a little bit before that, Mark. So Rounds Ranch was something we experimented with way back when we purchased our first farm. And we decided to do a little open house to see if people were interested to just check out farms. And we sent some flyers out to local community. That was pre-social media days. So everything was like, we put some flyers in parking lots and things like that. We had 1,100 people show up to want to see behind the scenes of a chicken layer operation. And we thought, this would be interesting. I wonder if maybe we should be continuing to look at some value-added agriculture that includes tourism, because there was such a huge interest at that time. So that was probably, that was back in 1994 when we did that very first experiment.
So you guys fired a bullet before firing a cannon. So you guys tested the market, and the market told you that the public wanted to see, I guess, the chicken operation. Is that where you got the most attraction going towards?
Yeah. So originally, what we did, we said, "Hey, who would like to see behind the scenes of a commercial chicken?" We had a layer operation with about 11,000 laying hens. Who'd like to go behind the scenes and see how it works? And so we opened it up. We had the egg board come. We did a big barbecue deal as well. Food, had a few other vendors there, and just experimented a little bit. But yeah, it was like, I don't know if you've ever been out in the country when there's a big farm auction on and the road is lined with cars down both sides. That's what it looked like. And we're going, I think we're onto something here. So yeah, that was back in 1994, only about 6 months after we'd purchased our poultry farm. And then we decided, hey, that's something we're going to investigate and look at.
So we started to offer school tours on that farm, and we would have the kids collect eggs and grade eggs. And then we also started a little on the farm, a barn, a petting zoo. So we renovated an old barn and made it into a petting zoo. We called it Rounds Ranch.
And we had our daughter, who was 12 years old. It was part of her entrepreneurship training. She had her little cash register. She'd go in and she would greet people coming in. They take a little bit of money. She'd get the bottles for bottle feeding the goats and the sheep, and show them the pigs, and she'd tour them around. So that's how Rounds Ranch was actually born. We had to negotiate with her what the name was going to be. She wanted to call it Carla's World, but we said, no, that doesn't have as much longevity, because Carla, if you ever leave, we're stuck with your name. So we're gonna go with Rounds Ranch. That was the name actually came. That'd be what, about 1997, around then. And we did an expansion on our egg laying farm to just sort of test the concept out. So we tested it even before, not only from the first outreach we had, but testing it a little bit to see how much traction we could get.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys have any other animals on the farm? You had chickens, and then was there anything else?
We had the chickens in the poultry barn, and then we had pigs and goats and sheep and rabbits and a donkey and Yeah, a couple ponies and things like that for the public. So then while customers would visit the market, they could drop their kids off at the petting zoo and they could enjoy, playing with the animals.
It's such a great example of, there's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy where you basically create a market that nobody else is actually doing. And so for you, like we actually grew up on a farm and we had 11,000 layer chickens as well at one point. And so, the eggs was, that was the business, right? You gather the eggs and, the truck comes and takes it out and, they do their thing. But you were able to think outside the box and to say, hey, listen, how else can we monetize this business? And so
Mhm.
it's such a great example of that. And so let me ask, what was it that triggered that idea? Because that's a creative outside the box thinking that you created a business that you were already operating a business, but you got creative. So where did that idea come from? Were you guys always creative?
I think the idea came actually from our customers because they would ask. And a lot of people came from the city and they were intrigued and interested in, like the chickens and behind the scenes. And so sometimes we would just let, tour them around. And so I think it was customer driven, when you say, Ken.
I'd say, yeah, customer driven. We've always recognized that we need to have a very good ear to listen to what the people want because sometimes they might be the leading edge of the next trend. Agritourism was not really much of a thing back at that time. There's another factor that came to mind as Jerry was talking. When we bought our first farm, we bought an egg farm. So we'd been working outside in the industry for like 10 years. We didn't have an opportunity to go back to a home farm when we graduated from school. So we actually spent about 10 years learning as much as we could in the industry. And so when we did buy our first farm, the interesting part is we didn't come from a chicken farm. And so it was all new to us. So we didn't know what's the right way to do this stuff. We didn't have any preconceived ideas. We didn't have any paradigms of how to follow a successful model. We were only a year in before we built a farm market on our farm. So that was one of our first businesses to expand and build a farm market. And we decided, what can we add around the breakfast menu? We got eggs. Well, we should have steak and eggs. We should have bacon and eggs. We should have sausage and eggs. And then we started building a market around that. And each one of the products we built had to be strong enough in the experience that people came. They would actually make a drive off the highway to come and get any one of our products because not only do we have the freshest eggs, because buying it from the farm is the freshest place you can get it, but then we start putting all these other things around our menu. And then when we were building the market, we had all these customers coming in, giving us ideas of things that they're looking for. And that's sort of backtracking a little bit about how we were getting some customer intelligence.
Yeah. It's such a I think it's such a great example for entrepreneurs. A lot of times we think we know what the market wants, but what you did was you listened and you just followed. You didn't try and create a market, you just followed a existing demand that were already asking for the product. So you just listened. And that is such a good example of an entrepreneur listening and then taking action. Like it seems so simple, but a lot of entrepreneurs like, oh, I like to go fishing, and so I'm going to do a fishing charter. But you're in an area where there's nobody that actually goes to fish, so there's no clients. You're
Mhm.
doing it based on your passion, but not based on what the market is actually telling you in this moment, asking you specifically for. That's such a good example of that. And then what you also did was that you did not have the experience in farming. So you came in with a fresh new perspective. We call that like rookie smarts. And so this idea of not knowing actually gives you a competitive advantage as well, right? Because now you're going to do it your own way that actually makes sense, which a lot of times you get stuck in a rut if you're in a business for so long. That's just how we've always done it. And so you brought fresh perspective as well.
Yeah, and also a teachable spirit. So we went and searched out for help, like with the chicken you had, the feed company, give you a lot of
Yeah, a lot of wisdom. I mean, we both had farming backgrounds, but neither one of us had any experience with chickens.
mhm, mhm.
So yeah, so building what you're saying, we were looking for help on almost everything. It's kind of like, all right, if we're going to go down this road, we were asking people for insight. Sometimes we got really good feedback. In the case of the Rounds Ranch adventure, our municipality, I remember the mayor saying, "Oh, I only gave them 6 months. I was, I was believing the business wouldn't last for more than 6 months." But the fact is, he didn't know all of the previous customer insight and information that we'd already received from the customers. So it was just interesting that someone in an office would have a perception that, well, that'll never fly, but yet it did, right?
Mhm.
And so it's interesting.
Did the mayor tell you that when you first started that you're only going to be 6 months, or did you find that out after?
He told me about a year in.
A year in, okay. So I would, because if it was me, like, and they told me that, I'd be like, I'll show you, right? But in this case, you're a year in and you were already successful. That's really
Well,
good.
it wasn't immediately successful. I would say it took us a few years to get it going, but we did have Valley Farm Market that supported it, that's funded it to grow. So it wasn't like as soon as we opened the ranch, because there was a lot of investment that had to go into it to get
Yeah.
it up and going. But you know what? In a few years, continuing to invest money into it and grow the business from the other businesses that we had.
So I think building on what Jerry's saying, one of our key strategies for business has always been having multiple revenue streams so that if we're going to try something new, especially when we do new ventures, to make sure that
Mhm.
there's a revenue stream that can support it if we need it to support it. Not everything takes off like a rocket and gets going. I mean, so like even when we bought our first farm, Jerry continued to keep her job for about a year, and then we started a consulting business, and then she came back, ran the farm, and I started on I was freelancing, but I started a consulting business, and I started traveling all over doing. So we always had more than one revenue stream feeding. So then we were able to build our market more quickly. We were able to expand, and so with multiple revenue streams, and that's always been something we believed in. It's kind of like there's vertical integration, which you understand having laying hens. You can produce it. Then, if you can get margin on the distribution piece, then you can get margin on the retail. So we built our market. We got margin all the way through. We were the retailer and the producer all the way
Mhm.
through, and eliminated trucking costs and things like that because we sold all of our production from our market. We had like close to 60,000 people would come into our market. And then we said, now we need to diversify our business, and we're going to have, so we need a vertical integration strategy and a diversification strategy so that we can have multiple revenue streams and as much as possible have vertical levels of integration with our multiple streams of revenue.
That's very smart. Very smart. The second income, or having another income as you're getting a business off the ground. So I can definitely resonate. So we run the real estate brokerage, so a real estate team north of Toronto, as you guys know. And so for us, we were like, okay, real estate investors, they would be able to come to us and we'd be able to find them a property. And so they kept coming to us, but real estate prices went up, interest rates doubled, and we couldn't find any great deals for them anymore. And so that we were like, okay, we have a starving crowd for real estate. 90% of millionaires made money in real estate. And we're like, okay, we need to go find an alternative. And so that's when we started looking down in southeast US. And so we started looking at apartment buildings. And so we went and I partnered up with the president of Mark Spain Real Estate, which is the largest real estate team in the US. They sold to a private equity group, and I had been masterminding with him for a number of years. And I said, hey, listen, I want to build this. You want to come? He's more of an operations guy, more of a visionary. And he's like, yeah, I'm in, to help investors, partner with investors, and go and buy these 100-unit apartment value add apartment buildings. And so we went and recruited all the best acquisition specialists and asset manager that's been doing it for many years. And we have a full-time team of 9. Now, I'm saying all that because there's no way we could have done that. And because it's very capital intensive at the beginning, because you make your money when you sell an asset 2 to 5 years after you do the business plan and the renovations on it. If we didn't have Faris team, our real estate brokerage, that was supplementing it to keep it going and get it off the ground until it takes off. Now we're in the green, so it's like one of those things that I think that is so smart. Build a business, make it extremely profitable, and then once it's profitable, where you can start supplementing for a short period. It's not a forever thing. Like, you got a short window, you got to do it. I think that is such wise counsel that will save you through that early struggle phase that all businesses go through.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it takes a lot of stress off if you know how you're gonna eat, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you hire people; they want to get paid. I mean, that's the thing. You can't just say, "Hey, can I give you an IOU?" From Dumb and Dumber, where they write the IOUs, is like, that is better than cash, right? I don't know. It's for those listening that have watched Dumb and Dumber. Hopefully, you resonate and you remember the part of that. Now, I want to go back to the learning mindset. So you went into a business you didn't know about, and so you started asking questions. What advice would you give the listeners that are thinking about going into a business? Maybe they're new into that business. How can they, we'll say, compound their learning to learn faster? What can they do to get off the ground sooner to be able to hit the ground running?
Okay, I'll give you one of the business that we started while we had our farm market. We thought, hey, we're attracting a lot of customers. We purchased another property with the sole purpose of making it a strawberry business. And we were going into an existing area. We already had 5 competitors. We're well established with sort of a pick your own strawberry business. Now, I didn't grow up with strawberries. I didn't have any experience with strawberries, but it seemed to be okay with the eggs. And we were learning a lot through asking questions. First thing we did was found there was a consultant in Minnesota, University of Minnesota, and we'd asked him if he could make a trip out and teach me everything that he's ever learned. He was teaching strawberry production in Minnesota, which has similar climatic conditions as we have in Canada. And I said, the average yield in Ontario is 7,000 pounds per acre on irrigated land. What's possible? Can we hit 4 times that? Can we hit 5 times that production? What is possible? And what do we need to do to get there? So that was probably the first thing. And he shared everything that he could. And we actually hit over 4 times the average production in the province within 3 years. And within 2 years, we were the best known strawberry farm in the area. We had 21 different flavors or varieties of strawberries. We coined it, just like in the apple industry, we got Honeycrisp and Macintosh and Cortland's. We did the same for strawberries. So we got Governor Simcoe's, Cavendish, V-Star. So like whatever the varieties you're looking for. And we also covered a portion so we could have the first strawberries of the season. And we planted the 21 varieties so we'd be the last ones producing. So we had a 6-week run where the strawberry season typically runs 2 to 3 weeks. And ours were like, could almost go up to 8 weeks depending on if we get enough cool conditions. But we stretched the season out. So we became, within 2 years, the most recognized, within 3 years, the largest, and it was actually very exciting. It was one of the most exciting, fun things I've ever done, because we actually had an OMAFRA person, which is Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food, strawberry specialist, come up and tell us that our strawberries, the leaves are too big. There's no way you're going to produce any fruit. Like, the plants are drawing so much from the soil and the leaves. I've never seen leaves so big before, but when you get this much vegetative growth, there's no way you're going to have strawberries. Well, the only thing, the strawberries grew just as big as the leaves. They were like the size of your fist, some of the varieties. And people were going like, whoa, you got to go over there. And all of a sudden it just blew up. And we just had tons of people come.
Oh.
And so there's an example of not knowing, but seeking wise counsel and asking lots and lots of questions.
So I have a on I have a quote in my room here. Says it's a proverb, and I'm actually going to grab it. One sec. I don't really do this. I know if you're listening to the podcast, you're going to have to go to the YouTube, but look at. So it basically says plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Right. So that's actually that's Solomon actually that said that. And I have these quotes up around my room, and so that is such a great. Nobody really think. I don't want to say no one. You did, and others have, but most people wouldn't think to go hire a consultant. You're getting into a business and say, "Teach me everything you know." And so you can actually do this with any sort of like marketing agency. You can say, "Hey, listen, what are you worth per hour? I want to sit and I want you to teach me how to do what exactly you know." And so that's great. Who's the best in your market? And call them up and say, "Hey, what are you worth per hour? I want to be able to mind your key learning experience." And everybody has a dollar, what they're worth, right? Everybody's, eventually they'll probably say yes. And that was, I mean, the results spoke as to the wisdom and what you did. That's really good.
Yeah, our problem after that was how do we get rid of all these strawberries? So we quickly built a brand new wholesale business, and we were the largest supplier of strawberries for probably a 50-mile radius. We ended up with 19 acres of strawberries, and that was going really well until we had Walmart came in with a new strategy to shift to centralized procurement agents. And then National Grocers, which is like Zehrs and Loblaws, they did the same thing, and then so did Sobeys. And what happened is all the local all of the local, not only restaurants, but all the local supermarkets that we were supplying, the local produce managers lost all their autonomy because it was the procurement agents who actually just, hey, we found a good deal down in Florida for strawberries. We're just going to ship them up. I don't care what you think. If you're getting them local, it doesn't matter. You got 200 cases of strawberries just showing up. And that happened in 2003 and then again in 2004. So we were a big supplier, but we saw a huge, so that clearly interrupted. We had like 30 Mexican workers, and we had to send some of them home early, and we left with like $30,000 of strawberries sitting in the field one year. And so one of the things we had to learn also in business is when
to shift.
to shift. And we have a thing, if it's a dead horse, stop riding it. If the market's shifted, like don't try and resurrect it or bring something back there's some new rules that are happening in the marketplace. And if we can't make the shift, Sobeys actually said to us, if you want to supply our stores, you need to supply all 44. That includes up to Thunder Bay. And you need to supply all of our stores because that's the way the new rules are going to work with our central procurement. And we decided one of the things that was challenging for us is the supermarkets were then dictating to us what they were going to pay.
Yeah.
They dictated to us what the discounts would be.
Yeah, and when they would pay 90 days later. And we said, no, we don't want to be in this market. Let's shift.
We want to be price setters. We want to be price takers.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So that was a big thing for us in all of our businesses because farming is typically being a price taker. And we wanted to be price setters. And that's why we always looked at value added.
So good. Price setters instead of price takers. What business do you think is out there right now where you think that there's an opportunity? Like when you look across the board right now, what looks exciting to you? Which industry right now in this current climate? I know that's a big question. That's a big question.
Oh, yeah. Good question.
I think an industry is the storage business. People have so much stuff they don't know what to do with it all. And so I know that friends of both of ours, they're into the storage and they do quite well with that.
Yeah, I was doing some calculations on a storage facility that was coming up for sale. We're invested in Georgia with the RV business. One of the things that's interesting is we got expensive housing, but RVs give people the mobility that they need to have, and so we're finding there's some interesting things happening in the marketplace as people are moving. So we do. I think one of the things that Jerry and I are most interested in, we look at the passive income streams.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the passive streams, we are owners of, like our solar assets are passive. The RV park, of course, that we're involved in is passive income. Some of the rental things that we do are passive income. And so we actually just like exploring, but I'm struggling a little bit to try and think which would be the top thing that would come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed I mean, the storage business is interesting. I've been told that it's kind of like a monkey sticking his hand in the jar and trying to grab a cookie, and he grabs it and then he doesn't want to let go of the cookie, and he can't get his fist out of the the jar because it's tighter on at the top, right? And so he keeps his hand in there because he doesn't want to let go of it. And so that's how you can relate to the storage. And so yeah, storage, apartments, and car washes. Those are actually like and so I'd classify RV parks in that as well, where you can buy them at mass, and provides really good cash flow, especially with where the market's going right now. Is less and less people can actually afford to buy homes. And so, rental, especially in the apartment space, we like the B class space, where it's like 1,600 to 2,000 after you do a renovation, because that market is very recessionary, and there's more and more people getting into that market versus the A class space where it's like 2,500 to 3,000. Not a lot of people can afford that a month. And so those seem to be the big ones that I've seen, which aligns with what you were saying in regards to the,
I like
the
that.
storage
We
and
need
the
to talk some more after this call about
yeah.
about
Opportunities.
some opportunities with the apartment space. We haven't had much experience with that, but I
Yeah.
really love to learn a lot from some people who know a lot more than we do.
Well, you do have a good track record of asking pros and doing really well with that. It's interesting. I've found the most successful people that I interview, they're all curious. They're always asking questions, and you guys are like right at the top, especially with, you're seeing a lot of fruit, right? You go into an industry and you go and ask, and it's interesting. I've learned as well that even as people become successful, the ones that continue to ask questions and continue to be curious, they just continue to thrive. The odd one you'll see, they made it and then they stop being curious, and they start to know it all, and then you can start to see the decline happening. I was really blessed when I started in real estate. I saw a couple of our top agents in our marketplace. They worked really hard. They got there. They stopped having that rookie mindset. Pride creeped in, and I just saw their businesses tank. And I got to see that firsthand. So, and I think that's very true across all businesses, all industries.
And one of the things you mentioned earlier about being with other people like-minded, it helps us maintain humility. It really does. When you've got other successful entrepreneurs that ask you good questions, if you're connected with people like that, it's a good thing, because I think when you've got the humility, you have a teachable spirit, then it's like life's an adventure. It doesn't matter what age you are. It's still exciting to look forward to what's next.
Yeah, so good. So I wanted to just go back a little bit in the conversation, and I want to get your thoughts so regardless I know there's from a politics standpoint, there's a lot back and forth, but I'm more curious about, as a, say, strawberry farmer, there's a lot of talk out there now with these deportations in the US, and a lot of the farmers out there that, the reality is there's a lot of illegals that are working on their farms that they're able to pay less. How do you see all this playing out? And do you see, okay, like the illegals are going to be, taken out of the country, and then we're going to bring in, legals where to keep the cost down. Like, curious to see your thoughts on this being in that industry.
Well, in Canada, I don't think we have too many illegals.
But in
I
the
could be wrong,
U.S.,
but in the US,
was
it's a different story. Like we have our Mexican workers, but we go through a program called the acronym is FARMS, and we have to have the housing inspected. We have to have the health unit comes out, apply. We have to put it out to all Canadians, advertise for like 8 weeks or something like that, and to make sure. And then we have to show that no Canadian wants to work for us. And then once we've done all of that, then we get approved to have our Mexican workers come. And we've had our Mexicans since
1998.
So we've done this every year.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so is it like a 2 month like visa that you would get? So they would come up for a couple months and then they
No,
would.
they come up the beginning of May and they leave the first week or so of November, around November 10th.
Yeah, close to 7 months.
Wow. That is so good as a Canadian to know that listen, like you actually go and they advertise. So you have to advertise the local community to make sure that local workers can, that's awesome. I love that, the government doesn't get a lot of things right, but that to me makes sense. Um, and so what do you think in the US where there's a lot of illegals coming? And do you think that industry will be affected much, or do you think they'll figure it out and kind of, businesses?
I think it'll definitely be affected. The one thing I do sense with the current administration in the U.S., there is support for farms, and I think that they will help facilitate processes to try and find a way to mitigate some of the consequences of that. Like in our own experience in Canada, when we only had 5 acres of strawberries, we needed 115 people, Canadians, that were signed up that wanted to come and help us pick. And we were lucky to have 15 to 20 of them show up every day. And we often missed our order volumes that
Right.
were required because we couldn't get enough workers. Once we got the immigrant workers, the reliability, dependability. In fact, the first week, I'll tell you something that blew my mind. We used to start at 7 in the morning with the Canadian workers, and they'd all get in there by 7:30, even though we started right at 7. After the first week, we had Mexican workers. One of them came to me and said, "Patron, can we start working earlier?" I'd never ever had anybody ask to start work earlier. And, well, what time do you want to start? Well, the sun comes up at 4:30. Can we be started by 5? Okay, you can start at 5. And so like it was just a different mindset because they came up, they're away from their families, they come to work and they want to make
Mhm.
as much money as they can. So they can go back and they can send their kids to post-secondary school, and they can take the resources and give their kids things that they couldn't have for themselves. And so we wanted to give them every opportunity we could for them to fulfill sort of their obligations to their family.
So they started earlier. I love that mindset. So they see the opportunity here, which is so good. Did you find that, say, somebody that is came in as an immigrant and they're working? Was their output like similar to a local worker, or was it like 2x or a 1.5x? What was it similar at the end of the day?
I would say far superior, exceeded our expectations. They were so steady, like
Steady.
they would be just consistently working all the
If it
time.
was
And
32 degrees out, or if it was
Mhm.
a cold day, because we do get some frosts in May sometimes, and we'd have strawberries already ready coming into May 24th weekend. And so they would have their winter coats on at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then they would work right straight through and work until dark. And yeah, so it didn't matter, temperature or otherwise. They would just dress accordingly, drop some layers off as they went through the day, and just work steady.
Mhm.
It was there.
And right now, like in we have a lot of weeding, you know, on the pumpkins and the sunflowers, and they would just hoe all day long. Like it would be like hours, 10 hours. They'd be hoeing.
We've asked the Canadians to try and keep up to the Mexicans, but it's not fair. So we want to make sure that we don't ask our Canadian students to work any more than probably about 2 or 3 hours alongside, because they're going to get too stiff. But the guys, they train themselves, and they just work steady. And sometimes we say, hey, you know what? It looks like it might be, we got a big rush happening right now. Hey, no problem, Patron. We work through lunch. We'll just keep going. We'll eat tonight. So and even the very first week when I told you about the 5 o'clock in the morning question, they kept coming to me showing the baskets, the boxes of strawberries, because they were very concerned about how the finished product looked for the end customer. And so they would have the strawberries stacked neatly, organized, so that it looks like it is a piece of artwork that they're actually giving to the customer. So they were totally connected with what was important.
That's so great to hear. What do you think is underlying that kind of like commitment to excellence and hard work? Like as a Canadian or American, you know, that grows up in the everyday average household, how can they like tap into that kind of consistency? Because I really think that if you just show up every day and you have a commitment to excellence and you care about, you know, that end product, like you're going to just outperform and eventually you'll be successful. You'll figure it out. What do you think are the underlying, maybe we'll say, key attributes or things that a entrepreneur can focus on to be, we'll say, to be able to adopt that kind of excellence?
Most often it's the Mexicans, they come because if they don't work, they don't eat, and their families don't eat back home. So they don't have any safety net to fall back on. But, you know, we've had that one family, you know, Matthew or Matt, right? Like he came from a family and he was driven to be able to work as fast as the Mexican workers, but he had that drive in him that was instilled from his family. They were just like that. Um, and generally, it's not common, right?
Generally, we don't find that farm work is a little harder physically than some other things as well. There's one other thing that comes to mind, Mark, with your question. Another thing that every employee wants to do a good job early on, and they put their best foot forward until they, you know, get through their first year or two performance reviews, and but then they can start to go down after that. And one of the things that we've seen is just slow and steady. But we've had a couple situations that happened. We had one of our workers get hurt, and so one of the guys has been with us for over 25 years. His father had got an obstruction in his intestine, and he didn't have money because in Mexico, if you don't have money, you don't get to go to the hospital. And so he told us about what was going on, and we said, all right, we'll just wire some money down to Mexico. He can get into the doctor right away. And so they got him in, and it got cleared, and his father continued living. And there was something about being available to serve him
And to have compassion and care for
and
him.
have compassion. And the relationship we have now, it's been 25 years. And he even named one of his child that wasn't supposed to be the accident child, but
No.
but
Surprise.
it was a surprise child. The surprise child, which he had a few years later, he actually named him after me. And I think part of it is we put a lot of commitment of being compassionate, being committed to know who their family is. I've been down in Mexico. I visited the family. I've congratulated each one of them when they've graduated from their university and been there for some special birthdays. And so I think that kind of commitment is also important for the relationships that we have with our workers.
Oh man, that's really good. You guys really define that So what I got from that was having a strong desire. It's got to be in you, nothing to fall back on as well. So that's really good. And then I think the end of the day, you guys were being that you guys were compassionate. You guys gave something when they needed it. Would give them that. Okay, I'm going to serve you for the rest of my life. You
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
you saved my family's life. And I think as a leader, it's really good to be looking for those opportunities where you can actually make impact. Now, there's a really good book that Robin Sharma wrote called "Lead Without a Title," and he talks about this idea that no matter what it is that you're doing, you can be a leader. And so the reference is like when if you're a janitor and you sweep floors, is like sweep floors better than anybody in the world, and you take ownership. And so that kind of mindset of leading and mastering what it is you do, it doesn't even matter what it is that you do. You can be the best in the world at it. And when you're going at it and you're pursuing to be the best at something, it's way more fun than just straight work. And so when you said about the workers were really focusing on making the basket as pretty as possible, they weren't just looking to pick strawberries. They wanted their end product to be excellent. And so they were probably proud showing you, it's like, look, right? And I think that's a really good perspective to have for an entrepreneur. Is like they may say like, "Oh, I'm in the rodent business." I interviewed a guy; he's super successful business guy, and he sees his business, pest control, as like being they're like superheroes helping public safety,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So I think that mindset going in that you're actually making an impact and that you do want to be the best in the world at that thing that you're doing is also, to add to what you were saying, is also another foundational, we'll call it, it's like a mindset that helps one be successful as an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Right.
I have a quick testimony about that, if I could. I remember at Rounds Ranch, we have a lot of birthday parties, and we had a young little boy. His friends had all left. The party was pretty much finished. It was only him and his mom were left. And I remember I came in, and I have a big black garbage bag with me, and I'm scraping cake off of the floor and picking stuff up underneath the picnic table. He's sitting on the picnic table, I'm sitting there on my knees and I give him like a high five. How was your birthday? He gives me a high five back. And I'm sort of picking up all the stuff off the floor. He leans over and says, Mommy, he's a really nice garbage man. And I thought, there's my identity right there. That's what I want to be known for, being a really nice garbage man. Right. So what you're saying about just being the best at whatever you do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what you just did there, I mean, that's such a good example of humility. And no matter who you are, you can pick up garbage, and people see that as well. And I think they respect that a lot. Um, you're never too good to do something like that. If it's good enough for you to do, then it means I can do it too, right? So that's now when you guys make a lot of decisions throughout the day. What values or principles do you filter your decisions through to be able to make sure that they're quality decisions?
Well, we base our decisions a lot on the Bible, what the Bible says, and so that's and our own faith. So that's where we filter our decisions through.
So like one of the proverbs that comes to mind, you used the proverb earlier, but one of the proverbs that comes to mind is very important for us in business is Proverbs 22:7, which is the the borrower is slave to the lender. And we always felt that we need to be very wise with how we manage debt so that we're not being slave to the banks, being slave to those who are lending us money. And so we've always had a strategy to get our debts paid down quickly. Um, and so that's one of the strategies, but you still need debt at certain times, especially when you're growing the business and expanding it. So how to be wise. So building what Jerry's saying about scripture, that's part of it for sure.
Well, I think that filter right there, I mean, I would say like I mean, there were a lot of good business guys in the Bible, right? And, I think that's where if you just filter and just make your decisions like through the passages in there, I mean, having a genuine love of people, I think that is like a foundational truth in, I mean, well, in the Bible, but also in business as well. Right. And I think the fruits of the spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Like those are like the core values, so to speak. Right. And so I think I think at a foundational truth that if you treat people the way that the Bible speaks to it, I think that's a really good head start. And there's also great principles like even Jethro and Moses on the reporting structure,
Oh
the
Right.
yeah.
1 to 10. So you have, 10 because everybody's going to Moses and there's a big lineup and Jethro comes along and says, like, this is crazy. What are you doing? And Moses is like, everybody's coming to me. He's like, okay, listen, structure, so everybody basically they have 10 people reporting to them. And so I thought, oh, that's so good. Cause that's what I found in our business. We have 100 team members, and I found that reporting structure was perfect because you can only really look after and do a good job having 10 people reporting. When you have more than that, it becomes we'll say less manageable.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
great wisdom. Great
Mhm.
wisdom. Something else as I was just reflecting on what you were saying. One of the things that was interesting, and this wasn't something that we actually got from the Bible, but it was more or less the importance of relationships. And we actually early on in our business, we had to make some really hard decisions because when you said about some making good decisions, we actually made a decision to go to one of our competitors to see if there's a way that we could create a win-win relationship so we weren't fighting with each other, we could actually work together. And it was it shifted the paradigm totally how they saw us, and we actually formed a relationship where we could actually, and it was related to our poultry business where they could process our eggs way cheaper than we could, and they could deliver them off, and they could do the distribution for the bigger supermarkets that we were doing, and we could do the smaller places where our delivery vans, like the ski resorts and things like that. So we built a win-win relationship with the second largest egg grading station in the province, and it was actually really amazing. And what we found out was really curious. It was about a year after we had formed that win-win partnership. They had said to us, "You know what? We saw that you guys were really in the way of us expanding our market, and we were just going to take you out. We were just going to drop the price until you guys basically disappeared." But because we went to them and said, "Hey, is there a way we can both win? And how do we both get what we want here?" That opened the doors for us to be successful and actually work with them. So that was another different strategy that was kind of cool.
Yeah. That's another creative idea. Not many people would think about that, right? Like how could you and your competitor make a win-win situation, right? It's kind of like right now with Canada and the US, instead of like going back and forth, like how can we make a win-win situation, thinking outside the box like that. That's really smart.
So you both can get what you want, more of what you want, instead of somebody having to win and somebody having to lose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that there takes humility to be able to do that, to like lower your pride, actually just let's go for coffee and just like throw that out there. And I think when people see that kind of humility, it's just hard to kick somebody when they're doing that, right? And I think if anything they would just respect you more by coming from that win-win perspective. Really good. Very good. Well, that's really great advice and great counsel. All right. Well, listen, I got to maybe like two of the questions that I was thinking about asking you guys because this is like so. it was really good. Now, just before I move on here to the rapid fire part of the conversation, you gave some really good investing advice there, which is great. Now, I'm curious, what do you think makes a leader great? If you were to summarize that, so what makes a leader great?
I think a leader who is a servant leader, compassionate, and really cares about their employees and their customers, um, as opposed to, and like what we were saying before, like if it's not like what's in it for me and always thinking about yourself, you're thinking about how you can come alongside and help others uh, attain what they want and they need.
Mm,
Jerry's
yeah,
especially good at
that's
that
great.
when it comes to, I mean, we get tested of this all the time. When you're in a tourist business and you've got customers coming and they've got certain expectations, and now their kids are acting up and this is going sideways and this is going sideways. And to watch her in action when, well, you know what? We're just going to help you get a free pass. We're going to give you an upgrade today. We're going to do this for you. It's like recognizing things that they're not even asking for sometimes and blessing them.
Mhm.
So I would say that's definitely the servant heart being played out. Um, Being good at listening. So it's our staff, it's our customers. Genuinely having a listening ear. I think that's probably the big thing. Is like, are we really hearing what's going on and we're observing what's happening, right? So I think
Mhm.
those are a couple of key things in terms of leadership. One of the things that I've had to do, Jerry prefers not to do this as much, but she asked me to do it. And that is sometimes we have to have some harder conversations with our employees, especially if they're not pulling their weight where they
That's
need
right.
to be. And that's also a love thing, because if I don't love you, I'm not going to invest the time. We're just going to um, open the door on the bus and turn the corner quick and give you a little push out. We prefer not to do that. We prefer to say, first, are you in the right seat on the bus? Are you on the right bus? And if you're on the right bus, we're going to invest what we need to. And sometimes it takes a harder conversation where, all right, and there's a scripture I remember using with some young guys. It was really only their second or third job, but I think it was Colossians 3:23, work as if you're working for the Lord. So the conversation was about what they weren't doing when I wasn't there. They seemed to be working good when I
Mm,
was there, but as soon as I wasn't there, what wasn't happening? And so we had a conversation about, work is hard when you're not being watched because the Lord's watching you all the time. And so so I get to do some of the harder conversations sometimes, but that's part of our commitment too.
Yeah.
In leadership is you got to care enough about your people that you want to equip them, you want to set them up to succeed. And so, like, there's some things that I remember learning. Um, if I'm ever concerned about an employee not doing their job, one finger pointing at them, three pointing back at me. Have I done everything I can to create the best environment? Do they have clear expectations? Do they agree with how they're being measured? Are they getting feedback, both directive feedback and also uh, corrective and directive feedback, but also are they getting praise? Are they getting recognized? Are we catching people doing the right things? Are we eliminating things that interfere with them not being able to do their job well? Maybe they got personal things happening at home and we need to just be able to help them and coach them and learn what those things are, right? Are they in agreement with what the incentives are, right? And why they're doing the job they are and what they get out of it, more than just the money, but why are they there? And help them understand their purpose around that. And then making sure they got the knowledge and skills they need to do a good job, right? And so I think it's really about, us looking back at ourselves. Have we done everything we can do to create the right environment to set people up for success?
oh man, that was so good. That's so good. Because I mean, the three pointed back at yourself, and then one at them type thing, and to be able to those tactics that you shared there are really great insights to be able to have like a crucial conversation with the team member, right? And so um, it's really good, and I think like having the courage to have the conversation as well. I think when you're coming versus coming instead of toe to toe with them, you're coming beside them and saying, "Hey, listen, here are some of the challenges that are in front of us, not be in front of you, but in front of us, right? Because then you're not pointing the finger. And then I
Mhm.
like those tactics there that you had shared. It's like, okay, let's go through each of them, right? And ultimately, once you go through all of them, it may be that they're just not motivated to do the job, right?
Right.
And you got to address it at that point. But
Right.
going through that framework that you shared there, I think it's really powerful.
Mhm. And one thing we've always done, especially with our leadership staff, the office staff, is hire someone who is better than we are at that particular job. You know, like right now with we have a young lady that does all of our IT and ticketing. Like she like far superior than what we could do. Like she just knows it. She's younger generation, amazing. We've hired a lady that has worked for us for over 20 years. Very creative. She does all our signs. She comes up with all the games that we do. You know, extremely creative. You know, even
Mhm.
our Mexican workers, they can work a lot long hours than we can in the hot sun and you know just a different jobs that we've had, we've always said, let's hire someone who's better than we are and then create a team that way. And so when we get around the
Mm.
table, they all come with their expertise and when we have meetings, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great insight as well. And so the key is you got to start looking for them, and then they are out there. And sometimes you got to pay a little bit more for them than you expect. But man, when you get real A players that are better than you and they bring value, they're worth their weight in gold. Like things just work so much better.
That's right. And now we're starting to do profit shares in a bigger way. And so then they have a bigger stake in the game and they really want to see the ranch succeed.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then you have other people that are pushing the business, and it's not just you, right? And that's how you can be in the business long term and not be worn out at the end of your career, right? Trying to do it all alone. That's really good.
I was just going to say that kind of leads, like one of the areas that we look at is succession planning and giving people opportunities. So like Jerry just mentioned about the profit share thing, but as we are looking at where we're at, we're saying we'd love to give an opportunity for younger entrepreneurs to sort of step in. We've had that one other time with our poultry farm where we actually passed it on to one of our employees who'd been with us for 10 years to give him an opportunity to get into his own business. And we have always been about trying to set people up. And he's got a family of three young girls at the time. And he said, you always told me that I do better if I had my own business than if I worked for you, for someone else. So would you come and look at a nursery greenhouse facility with me? And then Jerry said, why don't we have him come and take over our
For
poultry,
Valley Farm
our
Market.
valley,
Yeah.
our market that we've got. And so we were able to actually set it up so he didn't have any money. We were able to bless him that way and get him started into his own business. And I think that's where our mindset is too, is we love to raise up and equip people, but if they're willing to put in the work, because you need to work as an entrepreneur. It's if you're lazy, it's not going to work for you. But if you want to work for it and you want to step into your purpose and your destiny, and that's where God's wired you to be, we want to be able to equip people and set them up to step into those kind of roles.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good, we'll say, a legacy thing that you guys can, long after you guys were all gone here, right? You have other people that are still trekking on that you impacted. I love that. All right, guys. Well, let's get into the rapid fire part of the conversation. So we have three questions here. So we'll just go through it in rapid fire kind of sequence here. First one is what book has been the biggest impact in your that's helped you in your business?
We've already talked about it a little bit, but the Bible obviously is probably the number one book go to for us. But there's a couple business books earlier on in my career that had a fairly big impact. One was a really simple book by an author by the name of Ken Blanchard called Raving Fans, and it was really quite simple. It had three principles: decide what you want, discover what the customer wants, and then deliver plus one. And then Good to Great was a book written by Jim Collins. We have referred to that book a lot of different times. And Built to Last was the precursor to that. We read that one as well, but we end up using the hedgehog concept all kinds of times, and we're teaching different entrepreneurs about what do you want to be the best in the world at, right? What are you passionate about, and what's an economic engine? And when all three of those come together, and you can pinch me, hey, I get to do something I really love. I'm getting paid well for it. It doesn't even feel like work. All right, now you hit the sweet spot, and so let's get you stepping into that. So that's rapid fire, and those are probably quickly 3 books that.
Yeah, so good. All right. Second question is for both of you guys, what are 3 words that would best describe you?
Well, I think for both of us, the words we coined was a lot of people see us as energetic and generous, and we operate with integrity.
Yeah, very good. And final question, what advice would you give a entrepreneur that is either starting out or they want to level up and take their business to the next level?
Yeah, so if they want to take their business to the next level, some of the things we've already talked about in our story. Number one, um, be teachable at all times, right? So humility, we've talked about that already. I don't want to belabor that too much more. Another piece of advice I think is really important. You got to know your numbers. Like I'm more of a numbers guy. Jerry and I are both numbers people, but like if we're going to start a new business, we need to have a cash flow down. Like show me that this is going to work on paper. If I can't do some scenarios, and then one of the things we always ask ourselves right at the beginning, if we're starting another business, all right, here's the cash flow. Everything looks good on paper. We've got the high, the low, the positive, the realistic, the stretch goals. We got all of that done. But then we ask a question, what's the worst thing that could happen? And if it did happen, what would we do? So we always have our contingency plan of the worst thing before we pull the trigger on a new business. But knowing your numbers, and part of knowing your numbers is not only your cash flow, but knowing the tax system. Like I don't know, but a simple investor would say, well, I can invest and get a 10 or 12% return out of a mutual fund, or I can go and invest money on first mortgages right now and get 11% for private investing for first mortgages. But you look at the tax system, and the average person is paying like close to 30%, between 30 and 40% taxes. Where else are you going to get that kind of return? If you know the tax system and you understand your opportunities using the tax system, that's one of the ways that we were able to, just through the farm, understanding how the tax system works, put all those tax savings right back into your business. And if you make 30% or save 30% a year, and you multiply that by 20 years, you look at the kind of returns that you can make, right? So know the tax system. Another thing around that is structure. You need to have some wisdom around how to structure your business. We have 3 different structures. We have a sole proprietorship for our farm, which gives us all kinds of tax opportunities. We have a business that's incorporated, our holding company. Then we also have a limited partnership, and all 3 of them have very different purposes. So understanding the power of the purposes of the different structures that you can have, and making sure you're choosing ones that will work to your benefit. So if you've got a secondary source of income, how is it all going to play together? So just doing your math on that. I don't know. Anything else you got?
And don't rely on the accountant to tell you, know it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, because a lot of times they're just pushing paper and you're the number, they want to get to the next one versus you asking the questions. Hey, can we do this? Can you do that? Definitely wise counsel. And yeah, cash is king for sure. You run out of cash, you're out of oxygen, and you're no more, right? So you learn that pretty quick in business as well. And knowing the numbers, all great advice. Now, listeners that are out there, they want to reach out, or maybe they want to come visit you Rounds Ranch there in Simcoe. Can you? What's the best way they can reach out and find out and research a little bit more about you guys?
Well, we have a website, and it's roundsranch.com, and that's ROUNDS and RANCH.com. And then we also have a Facebook page, and we have Instagram.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Ken and Jerry. This was time flew by. It just the hour went by just like it was nothing, and such great counsel and wisdom. And I'm not surprised you guys are super successful there, and continuing to create legacy. So I really appreciate you guys coming on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was wonderful
Yeah,
being
it
on the
was
show.
great. Thank you.
And thanks for your insights. I
Yeah.
appreciated hearing even some of your perspectives on things today, Mark. That was wonderful.
Yes.
Very good. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to the show. If you liked it, go ahead and share and subscribe. And guys, we are getting closer to our next acquisition on Faris Capital. So if you're curious, you are looking to get into an investment, check out fariscapitalpartners.com, where we're buying 100-unit apartment buildings, and you can come in, partner with us in these one-off deals. So you can get on our short list if you go to that website. And just remember, guys, the fastest way to build wealth is to grow your business and invest into real estate. I love you guys. Have a good one.